Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sleep Space. Tonight we will talk about why your brain creates crazy dreams. You've probably had a dream so bizarre, so unpredictable, that you woke up wondering if your mind was secretly running some kind of experimental theatre while you were asleep. Maybe you've dreamt of flying through purple skies on the back of a giant hummingbird. Or maybe you've found yourself in your childhood home, except every room is filled with water and you can breathe like a fish. These are the kinds of experiences that make us pause and ask, why does the brain do this? What is the purpose of producing such wild, surreal, and sometimes terrifying narratives when we're unconscious? Tonight, we're going to unravel that mystery. To start, let's look at what dreaming actually is. Dreams are a product of your brain's activity during sleep, particularly during a stage known as rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. During REM, your brain is almost as active as when you're awake. Neurons fire in patterns that are complex, chaotic, and creative, and this is the fertile ground where dreams grow. Scientists can actually measure this activity. Your brain waves during REM look strikingly similar to those of someone who's wide awake, except your body is paralyzed to stop you from acting out the chaos inside your head. This paralysis is called REM atonia, and it's basically your brain's way of saying, okay, let's keep you from running down the hallway while you're dreaming about fighting off a dinosaur. But the fascinating part isn't just that dreams happen, it's that they're so unbelievably strange. If dreams were just logical rehearsals of your daily life, we might shrug them off as boring memory tapes. Instead, your brain creates experiences that bend the rules of time, space, identity, and reality itself. You can be yourself and someone else at the same time. You can walk through walls and you can encounter people who never existed. So why this madness? One leading explanation is that dreams are the brain's way of testing possibilities in a safe environment. Think of them as simulations. They're like a flight simulator for consciousness, where the rules can be bent or broken to see how you'd react. Take the threat simulation theory, for example. This idea suggests that dreams evolved as a way for humans to rehearse dangerous situations without actually being in danger. Imagine an ancient human dreaming of being chased by a predator. The brain would activate the fear response, the adrenaline rush, the strategies of escape. Even though it wasn't real, the practice could have made them more prepared when it did happen in real life. Fast forward thousands of years, and your brain still uses dreams to rehearse. But since most of us aren't being stalked by saber-toothed cats anymore, the threats in our dreams often appear in exaggerated or absurd ways, like a giant spider wearing a tuxedo. At the same time, dreams are also deeply tied to memory. When you dream, your brain is consolidating information you picked up during the day. It's like your mind is filing away documents in a cabinet, but instead of neatly labeled folders, it sometimes mixes the files together in strange ways. That's why you might dream about your boss showing up in your high school classroom, or your best friend suddenly transforming into a complete stranger mid-conversation. It's memory and imagination colliding in a blender. Now, here's where things get even more fascinating. The brain doesn't seem to care much about logical storytelling when it dreams. Instead, it's driven by emotions. Studies using brain imaging have shown that the limbic system, the part of your brain that processes emotions, is hyperactive during dreaming. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking and self-control, is less active. That imbalance creates the perfect recipe for bizarre, emotionally charged stories that don't necessarily make sense, but feel incredibly real while you're experiencing them. You might wake up thinking, Why was I so invested in protecting a loaf of bread from being stolen by a talking dog? But in the dream, it felt urgent, meaningful, even life or death. Another reason dreams are so strange is that your brain loves to connect dots, even when the dots don't belong together. The technical term for this is pattern completion. The brain takes fragments of memories, sensations, and ideas and stitches them into something that looks like a coherent picture, even if it's nonsense. It's like a storyteller who refuses to admit they don't know the plot. So they just keep making things up as they go along. And because you're dreaming, you believe it wholeheartedly until you wake up and realize that the story was full of plot holes. There's also a theory called activation synthesis, which paints dreams as your brain's attempt to make sense of random electrical activity. According to this idea, neurons fire randomly in the brainstem, sending signals up to higher areas of the brain. Your mind doesn't like randomness, it wants order, so it creates a narrative to explain the noise. That's why dreams often feel like they're being made up on the fly, because in a sense, they are. Your brain is improvising, like a jazz musician creating melodies out of scattered notes. Of course, not every scientist agrees on the exact function of dreams. Some argue they're simply a byproduct of brain activity, a kind of mental static. But most researchers believe dreams serve important purposes: processing emotions, consolidating memories, rehearsing survival strategies, and even sparking creativity. Think of some of history's great ideas that came from dreams: the invention of the sewing machine, the discovery of the periodic table, even famous melodies. These flashes of brilliance show that the dream state can be a playground for innovation. And then there's the weird fact that not everyone experiences dreams in the same way. Some people have highly visual dreams, others dream mostly in emotions or sounds. There are lucid dreamers who become aware they're dreaming and can take control of the dream world. There are people who dream in black and white, though that's rarer today than in the era of black and white television. And some people claim they never dream at all, though research suggests they probably do. They just don't remember. But perhaps the most striking thing about dreams is how they remind us of the mind's ability to create entire worlds from nothing. When you dream, your brain is generating landscapes, characters, plots, and emotions as vividly as any movie director. Except you're also the audience, and you usually forget the film once the credits roll. So why does your brain create crazy dreams? The short answer is that it's working through emotions, memories, and possibilities using a language that isn't bound by logic. It's the brain experimenting, improvising, and sometimes entertaining itself. And while the results can be funny, confusing, or terrifying, they're always a glimpse into the deeper machinery of the mind. Your brain is not just one uniform blob of tissue, it's a highly specialized network of regions, each with its own role, and they don't all behave the same way when you're dreaming. Instead, some areas are dialed up, others are dialed down, and that imbalance is exactly what makes dream logic feel so strange. Take the prefrontal cortex, for example. That's the region right behind your forehead that's responsible for planning, rational thinking, and decision making. When you're awake, it's like the brain's executive office, making sure your thoughts are coherent and your behavior follows the rules. But during REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex is much less active. In other words, the brain's fact checker takes the night off. Without it, your dream self is willing to believe just about anything: flying elephants, talking refrigerators, or a sudden realization that you're back in middle school, but somehow also running a company. Normally you'd question that, but in a dream, it feels completely natural. Meanwhile, other brain regions are on overdrive. The amygdala, which processes fear and strong emotions, is particularly active during REM sleep. That's why dreams often have such an emotional punch. A dream doesn't need to make sense to terrify you, delight you, or move you to tears. It's not about the logic of the storyline, it's about the intensity of the feeling. That's why you might wake up sweating after a nightmare that, in hindsight, sounds ridiculous. It wasn't the details that mattered, it was the emotional storm your brain whipped up while it was playing the scene. The hippocampus also plays a starring role. This is the memory hub of the brain, where short-term experiences get processed and filed away for long-term storage. During sleep, the hippocampus replays events from the day like clips on repeat. But instead of replaying them neatly, it tosses them into the dream stew with older memories and completely random imagery. That's why you might dream of eating lunch with a childhood friend you haven't thought about in years, right after watching them turn into a cartoon character. The hippocampus is like a DJ, shuffling through your memory playlist and sometimes hitting the wrong button, blending two tracks that were never meant to go together. The visual cortex in the back of your brain also lights up during dreaming. That's the part responsible for processing what you see. Even though your eyes are closed, this region is highly active, which is why dreams often feel so vividly visual. Interestingly, the visual cortex is creating those images from scratch, without any external input. Your brain is literally painting scenes, characters, and landscapes entirely internally. Think of it as a built-in VR headset powered by neurons instead of circuits. So when you add all of this together, your rational thinking being turned down, your emotions turned up, your memory fragments being shuffled, and your visual imagination firing wildly, you get the perfect recipe for dreams that feel intense, surreal, and unpredictable. Your brain isn't malfunctioning, it's simply running with a very different set of priorities than when you're awake. Now let's address a fascinating question. Why do dreams often feel so disjointed? Why do you suddenly jump from one scene to another without explanation? Neuroscientists believe this comes from the way the brain processes and integrates memory. Instead of a continuous film reel, dreams are built like a collage. Your brain grabs bits and pieces, faces, places, sensations, and stitches them together into a narrative that doesn't always transition smoothly. Think of it like a director who keeps cutting to random scenes without bothering with the connecting dialogue. But here's the twist. While the dream is happening, you don't usually notice those jumps. You accept them as normal. This is partly because your prefrontal cortex, the part that would normally demand continuity and logic, isn't policing the story. So your dream self might be having dinner in a restaurant one moment, then suddenly be on a spaceship the next, and instead of questioning how you got there, you just go with it. It's only upon waking that you realize how absurd the transitions were. There's also the question of recurring dream themes. Many people report dreaming of falling, being chased, showing up unprepared for an exam, or losing their teeth. Why these particular scenarios? Psychologists believe these dreams reflect universal anxieties and emotional patterns. Falling could represent feeling out of control in waking life. Being chased might symbolize avoiding a problem, and losing teeth might tap into fears about aging, appearance, or vulnerability. These themes don't appear randomly. They're shaped by deep-seated emotional currents in the human psyche, which surface when the brain is free to play without rational censorship. And then there are the dreams that are not just strange, but deeply unsettling. Nightmares are the extreme end of emotional dreaming, and they're often triggered by stress, trauma, or anxiety. But even nightmares may serve a purpose. They force you to confront fears in a safe, simulated environment. The idea is that by experiencing these intense emotions in dreams, your brain may be better equipped to process and regulate them when you're awake. It's like emotional training camp, where your mind rehearses how to handle situations that might otherwise overwhelm you. Of course, dreams aren't always stressful. They can also be wildly entertaining, even euphoric. Flying dreams are a classic example. They might reflect a desire for freedom or control, or simply the joy of breaking physical laws. Scientists think that these kinds of positive dreams might help balance out emotional stress, offering a kind of psychological release valve. In fact, some people report using dreams as a creative playground, waking up with new ideas, artistic inspiration, or even solutions to problems that seemed unsolvable the day before. This brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of dreaming, its connection to creativity. Your dreaming brain is free from the constraints of logic and reason, which means it can combine ideas in ways your waking mind never would. That's why so many breakthroughs in science, art, and literature have come from dreams. The brain in dreaming mode is like a mad scientist, tossing together ingredients that don't normally mix, and sometimes producing something brilliant. Let's also talk about the dream self. Have you ever noticed how you're not always quite you in a dream? Sometimes you're watching yourself from the outside, sometimes you're a different person entirely, or sometimes you're multiple characters all at once. This strangeness comes from the way the brain constructs the sense of self. Normally, your identity is anchored by continuous sensory input: your body, your environment, your memories. But during dreaming, those anchors are loosened, so your sense of I becomes fluid. The brain can project identity onto any character or perspective in the dream, which is why you can shift roles so easily without questioning it. Another mystery is why we so often forget our dreams. You might wake up with vivid images, only for them to vanish within minutes. That's because the brain's memory systems aren't fully engaged during REM sleep. While the hippocampus is replaying memories, the prefrontal cortex isn't storing them efficiently. In other words, dreams often slip through the cracks of memory consolidation. That's why people who keep dream journals, writing down their dreams immediately upon waking, are better able to remember them. They're essentially capturing the dream before it evaporates. But forgetting dreams might actually be useful. If we remembered every dream in detail, our waking minds would be cluttered with strange, irrelevant stories. By letting most of them fade, the brain ensures that only the most emotionally significant or meaningful dreams stick with us. It's a kind of mental filter that keeps us from confusing dream life with waking life. One of the most fascinating questions about dreams is whether they serve an evolutionary purpose. After all, the human brain is incredibly energy hungry. It burns about 20% of your body's total energy, even though it's only about 3 pounds of tissue. So if the brain is going to spend hours every night firing neurons like fireworks during REM sleep, there must be a good reason. Otherwise, evolution might have weeded out such an expensive habit long ago. One of the leading theories, as we touched on earlier, is the threat simulation hypothesis. Imagine our distant ancestors living in environments where predators, rival tribes, and dangerous landscapes were a daily reality. A person who dreamed of running, hiding, or defending themselves might have developed quicker reflexes and stronger survival instincts in waking life. Nightmares, in this sense, weren't pointless. They were training exercises. The dreamer rehearsed fear, escape, and confrontation in the safety of their mind, so when danger came in the real world, they were more prepared. But that's not the only evolutionary explanation. Another school of thought is that dreams help with social bonding and understanding. We are, after all, deeply social creatures. Being able to predict how others think and behave has always been essential to survival. Dreams often involve social scenarios, conversations, conflicts, cooperation. Even if those scenarios are bizarre, they might help the brain practice empathy, negotiation, and the navigation of social hierarchies. If you've ever woken up from a dream where your best friend betrayed you or a stranger showed you kindness, you know how powerfully dreams can stir social emotions. The brain might be using those dream interactions as emotional rehearsals, giving you practice at handling the complexities of human relationships. Psychologists have long been fascinated by this connection between dreams and emotions. Sigmund Freud, who wrote one of the first big books on dream theory in the early 1900s, famously called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. He believed they were a window into hidden desires and suppressed thoughts. Now, Freud's theories are mostly outdated and often criticized for being more imaginative than scientific. But his central idea, that dreams reveal something about our inner lives, still resonates today. Modern neuroscience suggests that Freud was partly right, though not in the way he imagined. Dreams don't necessarily encode secret symbols that need decoding like some kind of psychological crossword puzzle. Instead, they reflect the emotional state of the dreamer. If you're anxious, your dreams are more likely to be unsettling. If you're content, you may dream of pleasant scenarios. It's less about symbolic codes and more about the brain integrating your emotional experiences into its nightly theatre production. This brings us to an interesting paradox. Dreams are both universal and deeply personal. Everyone dreams, but no two people dream in exactly the same way. Even recurring themes like being chased or flying manifest differently depending on the individual's life, culture, and experiences. For example, in societies where literacy is less common, people rarely dream about reading or writing, while in literate societies, those dreams are more frequent. Similarly, people who play video games often report dreams where the perspective shifts into first-person gameplay mode. The content of our dreams is shaped by what we're exposed to, blended with the timeless primal emotions of fear, desire, joy, and confusion. Dreams also seem to play a role in problem solving. Many experiments have shown that people who sleep on a problem are more likely to solve it than those who stay awake thinking about it. That's because dreams allow the brain to test out unusual connections. The logic-free environment of dreaming lets your neurons fire in combinations that wouldn't normally happen when you're awake and rational. Sometimes those odd combinations stumble upon something useful. It's like letting your mind wander outside the fences of logic until it finds a path you didn't see before. There are famous examples of this. Dmitri Mendeleev, the chemist who created the periodic table, reported that the full layout came to him in a dream. Paul McCartney dreamed the melody for Yesterday. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was inspired by a vivid nightmare. These are dramatic cases, but they point to a broader truth. Dreaming minds can be remarkably creative. Even if most of us don't wake up with the next great novel, our dreams are constantly stitching together new ideas, testing them in fantastical scenarios, and maybe giving us insights that influence our waking decisions. But not every dream has a clear purpose or a deep meaning. Sometimes they're just chaotic mashups of thoughts and images, like your brain is running a late-night variety show with no script. That randomness, though, may also have a hidden function. Some scientists believe it keeps the brain flexible. By regularly jumbling together unrelated ideas and scenarios, dreams may prevent your mind from getting stuck in rigid patterns of thought. It's like mental cross-training, exercising neural pathways that you wouldn't normally use when awake. And then there's the emotional housekeeping theory. Throughout the day, your brain builds up emotional residue. Frustrations, worries, excitement, disappointments. Dreams may act as a nightly cleaning crew, sweeping through the emotional clutter. This doesn't mean you dream out every single stress of your day, but the brain may use dreams as a way to process strong emotions, smooth out their edges, and file them away. That's why, after a particularly stressful day, you might dream about being overwhelmed by a tidal wave, or after a joyful day, you might dream about soaring above mountains. The brain translates emotional energy into symbolic scenarios, helping you regulate your inner world. Of course, if dreams are meant to regulate emotions, why do nightmares sometimes leave us more unsettled? Researchers think that nightmares may be an overload. When the emotional circuits are pushed too hard, the dream becomes distressing rather than cathartic. In conditions like PTSD, where trauma overwhelms the brain's emotional systems, nightmares can become chronic. In these cases, dreaming doesn't resolve emotions, it keeps replaying them, like a record stuck on repeat. This shows us that while dreaming has powerful functions, it's not always a perfect system. Now we should talk about the sheer weirdness of dream physics. Why can you float through walls? Why do objects morph? Why does time warp? These oddities aren't just fun details, they reveal how the brain works when freed from sensory input. In waking life, your brain is constantly anchored by reality. Walls are solid, gravity pulls you down, time moves forward at a predictable pace. But in dreams, those anchors are gone. Your brain generates the environment internally, which means it can break or bend the rules at will. It doesn't need to follow physics because it's not actually receiving physical input. It's free to experiment. The laws of reality become more like suggestions. Dream time is especially strange. Sometimes you feel like you've lived through hours or days in a dream, only to wake up and realize only minutes have passed. This distortion happens because your brain doesn't have an external clock during dreaming. It's not measuring time by the sun or by a watch. It's stretching or compressing moments according to the flow of the narrative it creates. That's why dream experiences can feel vast and epic, even though they occur in the blink of an eye. So when you step back and look at all of this, the evolutionary benefits, the emotional processing, the creativity, the warped physics, you see that dreams are far more than random nonsense. They're a multi-layered phenomenon, blending biology, psychology, and imagination into nightly stories that no writer could ever fully replicate. They're at once profoundly practical and deeply strange. And the crazy part? For most of human history, people didn't think of dreams as brain activity at all. They thought of them as messages from gods, glimpses of the future, or journeys of the soul. Even though we now know that dreams come from neurons firing, that ancient perspective shows just how powerful the dream experience has always been. It feels otherworldly, so much so that entire cultures built myths, rituals, and prophecies around them. Dreams have always been at the boundary between the known and the mysterious, and in many ways they still are. For as long as humans have been around, we've been trying to explain why dreams happen. Long before neuroscience, people looked at dreams and thought, this has to mean something. After all, how could you ignore experiences so vivid, so emotional, and sometimes so prophetic. It made sense to ancient cultures to believe that dreams were messages from the gods, spirits, or even glimpses of another realm. And in a way, this perspective wasn't completely off the mark. Because even if dreams don't literally predict the future, they do reveal the deep workings of the mind, which can feel just as mysterious. Take the ancient Mesopotamians, for example. They believed dreams were a form of divine communication. They even wrote down dreams on clay tablets and categorized them. Good dreams came from benevolent gods. Bad dreams came from demons. Egyptian culture took a similar view. They thought dreams were messages from the gods and created dream books to interpret their meaning. A dream of flying, for instance, might be seen as a sign of divine favor, while dreaming of drowning could be taken as a warning. The Greeks and Romans also took dreams seriously. Aristotle thought they reflected bodily states, like fevers or indigestion. Others believed they could reveal hidden truths. In fact, entire temples called Asclepions were devoted to dream incubation. People would sleep there in hopes of having a dream that provided healing or guidance. In these cultures, dreams weren't dismissed as random nonsense. They were woven into medicine, religion, and daily life. Fast forward to more recent centuries, and you'll find that dreams kept their status as mysterious messengers. Medieval Europeans often saw them as omens or warnings. Some indigenous cultures view dreams as journeys of the soul, places where ancestors can be met or wisdom can be received. Even today, many people treat certain dreams as deeply meaningful. You probably know someone who swears their dream predicted a real-life event. Whether or not that's scientifically accurate, it shows how powerful dreams feel. They blur the line between reality and imagination so convincingly that we can't help but wonder if they mean more than random brain static. And then came Sigmund Freud in the late 19th century, shaking things up with his book, The Interpretation of Dreams. Freud proposed that dreams were a window into the unconscious mind, full of symbols that revealed repressed desires, especially the ones that polite society wouldn't allow you to express. While his theories haven't held up scientifically, turns out not every dream about climbing a staircase means you're secretly fixated on your parents. Freud did influence how we think about dreams. He was one of the first to treat them as a psychological phenomenon rather than just supernatural or meaningless. Carl Jung, one of Freud's contemporaries, took the idea further. He believed dreams tapped into something bigger than personal psychology, the collective unconscious, a kind of shared pool of archetypes and symbols that humanity carries. According to Jung, if you dreamed about a wise old man or a mysterious shadowy figure, you weren't just dreaming about your own psyche. You were connecting to universal themes that all humans experience. Jung's ideas are still popular among people who see dreams as a bridge between personal experience and something larger, maybe even spiritual. Modern science, of course, has shifted away from decoding dreams like horoscopes. Neuroscientists see dreams as byproducts of brain processes, with meaning that's often less mystical and more emotional or practical. Still, there's something irresistible about trying to interpret them. You wake up from a dream so vivid, so emotionally charged, that you can't help but wonder, what was my brain trying to tell me? Maybe it's not a prophecy, but maybe it is your brain highlighting an emotion you haven't processed, or a memory that still lingers. Here's where the symbolic side comes in. While science shows that dreams don't always have universal meanings, they do reflect personal concerns. If you dream about showing up unprepared for a test, that might not literally mean you're worried about school. It could be your brain expressing a broader feeling of being unprepared in life. If you dream of your teeth falling out, it could reflect anxiety about appearance, aging, or even helplessness. The key isn't to look up a universal dream dictionary, but to connect the imagery to your own waking life. And this is what makes dreams so interesting. They're deeply personal art pieces, created every night by your brain. Each one is unique to you, shaped by your memories, fears, hopes, and the weird wiring of your neurons. Sure, there are common patterns, but no one else will ever dream exactly what you dream. In that sense, dreams are as individual as fingerprints. Now let's zoom back in on the crazy factor. Why do so many dreams get so surreal? Why not keep them grounded in reality? One possibility is that surrealism is the brain's way of making abstract ideas feel vivid. For example, your brain can't show you the concept of anxiety as a word. It needs to turn it into an image. So it might turn your stress about an upcoming deadline into a dream about being chased by an enormous clock. It might take your nervousness about an awkward conversation and transform it into a dream where your tongue literally falls out. It's symbolism on steroids, which is why dreams can feel both absurd and strangely meaningful at the same time. There's also the entertainment factor. Your brain doesn't dream for fun, at least not consciously, but the sheer creativity of dreaming does make it entertaining. Think about it. Your brain is writing, directing, and starring in its own nightly film, complete with special effects and plot twists. Sometimes it's a comedy, sometimes a horror movie, sometimes just abstract experimental art. If nothing else, it's proof that the brain is inherently creative. Even when you're not trying, it generates stories that no novelist could fully capture. Dreams can also expose just how flexible your sense of reality really is. When you're awake, you take for granted that there's a stable world with consistent rules. But dreams show how easily the brain can construct and then deconstruct entire realities. In one moment, you're convinced you're sitting in your kitchen. In the next, the kitchen is floating in space, and you're totally fine with that. This flexibility is part of what makes the human brain so powerful. It's not locked into one rigid perception of reality. It can simulate countless others, even if they're bizarre. And this brings us to the strange phenomenon of lucid dreaming. Normally, you're swept along by your dreams, a passive participant in whatever plot your brain throws at you. But in lucid dreams, you realize you're dreaming while it's happening. Suddenly, you can exert control, fly at will, change the scenery, interact with characters knowingly. Scientists believe this happens when the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of the brain, switches back on just enough to give you awareness, while the rest of the dream machinery keeps running. Lucid dreaming is a fascinating example of how flexible dream states can be. Some people even train themselves to lucid dream regularly, using it as a playground for creativity or personal growth. Still, even without lucidity, the sheer strangeness of dreams serves an important function. It shakes up the brain, blending ideas and emotions in ways that ordinary thought cannot. The surrealism is part of the process. It forces the brain to explore possibilities outside the normal rules. That's why even the weirdest dreams have value, even if they don't make sense on the surface. When you think about it, this nightly cycle of madness is both grounding and humbling. It reminds us that the brain is not just a calculator crunching facts. It's a storyteller, an artist, a trickster. Dreams expose that hidden side of ourselves, the part that is endlessly creative, endlessly emotional, and sometimes endlessly absurd. And maybe that's the point, to give us a break from logic, a chance to wander through worlds that don't exist but still feel real. A reminder that the mind is bigger and stranger than waking life allows us to see. If you really want to know why your brain cooks up such wild, surreal dreams, you have to look not just at the regions of the brain involved, but also at the chemistry that fuels them. Your brain is basically a giant chemical factory, constantly releasing neurotransmitters that regulate your thoughts, emotions, and even your sense of reality. When you're dreaming, the chemical balance shifts dramatically, and that chemical cocktail explains a lot of the madness. One of the key players here is serotonin. During the day, serotonin helps regulate mood, focus, and overall mental stability. But during REM sleep, serotonin levels drop sharply. That dip may be one reason why dreams feel less controlled and more chaotic. Without serotonin keeping things steady, your emotions can swing more freely, and your mind can wander into unpredictable territory. Dopamine, on the other hand, ramps up in certain brain areas during REM. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter associated with reward, motivation, and novelty. It's what gives you that thrill of discovering something new. So in dreams, dopamine may be part of what makes them so vivid and engaging. Even if the plot is absurd, like riding a unicycle across a desert of marshmallows, your brain treats it with a sense of intensity because dopamine makes it feel important. Then there's acetylcholine, which surges during REM sleep. Acetylcholine is involved in learning and memory, and its heightened presence might be why dreams are tied to memory processing. It also stimulates the visual cortex, which helps explain why dreams are so strikingly visual. In fact, REM sleep is sometimes called paradoxical sleep, because even though you're unconscious, your brain is buzzing with activity, almost like it's wide awake. Acetylcholine is a big part of that paradox. But while some chemicals go up, others go down. Norepinephrine, which helps you stay alert and respond to stress during the day, drops to almost zero during REM. That's part of why you don't question bizarre dream events. Normally, norepinephrine helps you detect and respond to threats rationally. Without it, you might not notice that the person talking to you in your dream is actually your cat wearing a business suit. You just accept it. This shifting chemical balance essentially rewires your consciousness for the night. You're still you, but your perception of reality is bathed in a different chemistry. It's as if your brain is experimenting with new operating conditions, dialing down logic, dialing up emotion, and allowing images and sensations to flow unfiltered. The result is the theatre of the absurd that we call dreaming. Interestingly, this chemical mix also explains why dreams feel so emotionally exaggerated. With the amygdala firing hard and the usual rational brakes weakened, your brain amplifies feelings. A small worry in waking life can become a full-blown nightmare scenario in dreams. A minor crush can morph into a sweeping love story complete with castles and cosmic sunsets. It's not just that your brain is telling stories, it's telling them on a massive emotional scale, thanks to the chemistry of REM sleep. Now, why does all of this happen at night? Why doesn't the brain dream while we're awake? The answer lies in the way sleep cycles are structured. Your sleep moves in repeating cycles of about 90 minutes, alternating between lighter stages, deep, slow-wave sleep, and REM. Dreaming can occur in any stage, but REM is the hotbed for the most vivid and bizarre dreams. Scientists think this cycle evolved to balance different needs: deep sleep for physical restoration and REM sleep for cognitive and emotional processing. Think of it this way. During the day, your brain is bombarded with sensory input. Everything you see, hear, smell, touch, and feel. It has to prioritize survival and daily function. There's not much room for random creativity when you're crossing a busy street. At night, when external input shuts off and your body rests, the brain finally has the chance to sort, reorganize, and experiment without distractions. That's when dreams happen. They're like the brain's after-hours projects, done once the day's business is over. But the why at night question has another layer. Dreaming while awake would be downright dangerous. Imagine hallucinating vividly while you're driving or chopping vegetables. By confining dreams to sleep, when your body is paralyzed and your sensory input is limited, your brain can safely explore wild scenarios without putting you at risk. It's the perfect arrangement. Your mind gets to run free while your body stays put. The paralysis itself is worth mentioning. During REM, the brainstem sends signals that shut down most voluntary muscles, creating what's known as REM atonia. This prevents you from physically acting out your dreams. Most of the time, this works flawlessly, but in rare cases, the system glitches. That's when sleep disorders like REM behavior disorder occur, where people actually act out their dreams, sometimes dangerously. It's also the basis for sleep paralysis, where you wake up while the body is still paralyzed and feel trapped. In those moments, the vivid dream imagery can even spill into waking life, leading to hallucinations of shadowy figures or strange sensations. As terrifying as that feels, it's simply your brain overlapping dream chemistry with waking awareness. These oddities remind us that dreaming isn't just about wild stories. It's about a very real shift in brain function. The machinery of dreaming is biological, even if the results feel otherworldly, and that biology is surprisingly precise. For instance, REM sleep tends to occur more in the latter half of the night, after your body has gone through deep restorative phases. That means your strangest, most elaborate dreams are more likely to happen in the early morning hours, right before you wake up. It's no coincidence that so many people report remembering dreams when they wake naturally, without an alarm. They're emerging directly from REM sleep, with dream imagery fresh in their minds. Now let's step back and appreciate the strangeness of all this. Your brain, a lump of tissue weighing less than a watermelon, somehow has the capacity to create entire universes while you're unconscious. It manipulates time, space, identity, and emotion as if it were a master playwright. And yet, it does this automatically, every night, without your permission. You don't have to schedule your dreams, design them, or consciously decide to run them. They just happen. That's how deeply wired dreaming is into the human experience. And here's another fascinating detail. Almost all mammals experience REM sleep. Cats twitch their whiskers, dogs kick their legs, rats show bursts of brain activity during REM. This suggests that dreaming isn't unique to humans. It may be a universal mammalian trait. If that's true, then dreaming must be incredibly important to survival. Otherwise, evolution wouldn't have preserved it across species. Your dog running in its sleep may not just be chasing an imaginary rabbit. It could be rehearsing instinctive behaviors in the same way humans rehearse threats. Even birds experience REM-like states, though theirs are much shorter. That means the origins of dreaming could stretch back hundreds of millions of years. Dreams, in other words, might be as ancient as sleep itself. That adds another layer of wonder. When you dream, you're not just engaging in a human quirk. You're tapping into a phenomenon shared by countless animals across evolutionary history. And yet, humans stand out because we can reflect on our dreams. We wake up, remember them, analyze them, laugh at them, or even turn them into stories and works of art. Dreams are raw material, and our waking minds sculpt them into meaning. That reflective step, the ability to say, "Why did I dream that?" is what makes human dreaming so uniquely rich. So why does your brain create crazy dreams? On a chemical level, it's the result of neurotransmitter shifts that amplify emotions, weaken rational filters, and fire up imagery. On a biological level, it's the nightly maintenance system of a brain that's both resting and working. On an evolutionary level, it's a behavior so important that it's been preserved for millions of years. When you look at it this way, the craziness isn't just random, it's essential. It's how the brain keeps itself sharp, flexible, and deeply human. If you've ever woken up from a dream that felt like a Hollywood blockbuster, complete with impossible landscapes, gravity-defying action scenes, and characters who made absolutely no sense, you might wonder why your brain doesn't stick to simpler, more realistic plots. After all, wouldn't it be easier for your mind to just replay bits of your daily life like a documentary? The truth is, your brain is not in the business of producing calm, straightforward films. It's in the business of running an enormously complex system of predictions, simulations, and emotional processing. That means chaos is not only allowed, it's necessary. Crazy dreams are often the side effects of a brain trying to make sense of the unpredictable world you live in. To understand why your dreams feel so strange, you have to look at one of the brain's most essential roles. It's a prediction machine. At every moment of your waking life, your brain is forecasting what might happen next. For example, if you're walking down the street and see a ball roll onto the road, your brain immediately calculates possible outcomes. Maybe a child will run after it, maybe a car will stop, maybe nothing will happen. This predictive coding helps you navigate reality efficiently. When you sleep, that prediction system doesn't just switch off. Instead, it keeps running simulations, sometimes combining fragments of reality in unexpected ways. That's why you can find yourself on a train where your boss suddenly turns into your childhood pet. It's your brain stress testing different scenarios without the constraints of real-world logic. Another reason dreams turn bizarre is the way your memory systems interact during sleep. Your hippocampus, which handles memory consolidation, replays and reorganizes fragments of your day. Meanwhile, your neocortex is busy trying to make connections and integrate those memories into your long-term knowledge. But these two systems don't always communicate cleanly. Imagine a filing clerk working in the dark, shuffling documents into the wrong folders. Suddenly, your memory of talking to a friend at lunch gets spliced together with a random image from a movie you watched years ago. That collision shows up in your dream as a surreal conversation where your friend quotes lines from a film character. It feels nonsensical, but at the neural level, it's just cross-wiring between memory networks. The brain also has a talent for turning emotions into storylines. During sleep, your amygdala, which processes fear and strong feelings, is more active than usual, while the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational decision-making, takes a backseat. This is a recipe for dramatic, illogical narratives. With emotions cranked up and logic dialed down, your dreams become hypercharged with strange symbolism. A tiny disagreement with a coworker might morph into a dream where you're battling a giant monster, because your brain is exaggerating the emotional tone to process it more deeply. The result is a dream that makes little sense, but leaves you with a lingering emotional echo when you wake up. And then there's the role of creativity. Dreaming is one of the rare times when the brain can operate outside the limits of reality. In waking life, you're constrained by physics, social rules, and linear thinking. But when you dream, those rules loosen, and your mind is free to remix information in ways you'd never consciously consider. Artists, writers, and scientists throughout history have credited dreams with sparking breakthroughs, from the melody of famous songs to the structure of molecules. The bizarre quality of dreams isn't a flaw, it's the brain exploring uncharted territory, testing out wild combinations to see what sticks. Your dream about flying through a city made of glass towers might not solve a problem directly, but it reflects your brain's willingness to think outside the box, literally and figuratively. There's also the influence of biology. Neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine, which regulate attention and logical thought when you're awake, are significantly reduced during REM sleep. This biochemical shift makes the brain's activity less orderly, more fluid, and more prone to leaps of association. It's like switching your playlist from carefully curated classical music to a DJ mixing random samples from every genre at once. The outcome is unpredictable, sometimes absurd, and often strangely entertaining. Scientists have proposed that this strangeness may serve a deeper function. One theory, known as the threat simulation hypothesis, suggests that dreams allow you to rehearse dangerous or challenging situations in a safe environment. That might explain why so many people dream about being chased, falling, or facing impossible odds. Even if the dream seems ridiculous, your brain may be practicing survival responses, training you to stay alert to danger. In this sense, the craziness of dreams could be evolutionary, a mechanism that gave our ancestors a mental advantage in facing real-world threats. But if dreams are about survival and memory, why do they sometimes feel completely irrelevant, like dreaming of arguing with a talking sandwich or attending a concert on the moon? One possibility is that not every dream has to be useful in a direct sense. Some might simply be byproducts of the brain's nightly housekeeping. Just as your computer produces temporary files during processing, your brain generates strange storylines while reorganizing information. These leftover fragments may not have meaning, but they reveal how dynamic and unpredictable your mind truly is. Humor also plays into the dream experience. Because the brain is free from the usual restraints of waking life, it sometimes throws in absurdities that resemble jokes or surreal comedy. Think of it as your mind's way of lightening the load. Dreams where logic collapses can feel funny upon waking, even if they were confusing in the moment. They remind you that the brain isn't only a serious machine for survival and memory, it's also capable of play, nonsense, and invention, even while you're unconscious. When you consider all these factors, prediction, memory consolidation, emotional processing, creativity, biochemistry, and evolution, it makes sense that dreams come out looking chaotic. They're the messy, experimental side of consciousness, unpolished but essential. If your dreams were too neat or literal, they wouldn't allow for the kind of flexible, adaptive thinking that humans are so good at. The craziness is the point. It's what lets your brain explore possibilities beyond the ordinary, preparing you for the unpredictable nature of reality itself. One of the strangest things about dreams is how effortlessly your brain breaks the rules of time, space, and logic without you even questioning it while it's happening. You can be sitting in a classroom as a child, then blink, and you're suddenly at your current job talking to people who don't exist. all while riding on a roller coaster through a desert. None of it lines up, yet during the dream it feels completely normal. The question is, why doesn't your brain notice how illogical it all is? The answer lies in how certain regions of the brain take turns resting during REM sleep. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for reasoning, critical thinking, and self-awareness, becomes less active while dreaming. This is the same area that makes you second-guess yourself in daily life, like when you're about to send a risky text message or buy something you don't need. With that part of the brain offline, your dreams aren't subject to the same level of scrutiny. That's why you can watch your car turn into a horse or have a conversation with someone who's both your neighbor and your favorite celebrity at the same time, and not bat an eye. Your brain is suspending disbelief by default. Meanwhile, other regions of the brain are running at full throttle. The visual cortex, which processes images, is highly active, creating the vivid scenery and details in your dream world. The limbic system, particularly the amygdala, is also buzzing with activity, which explains why dreams feel emotionally intense. You can go from exhilaration to terror in seconds, and those swings feel real even if the events are absurd. What you're left with is a movie-like experience, full of visuals and feelings, but lacking the internal critic who normally steps in to ask, does this even make sense? This is also why dreams tend to be fragmented. Instead of following a single narrative thread from beginning to end, they often skip around like a badly edited film. One moment you're on a beach, the next you're underwater, and then suddenly you're back in your childhood home. The transitions are jarring, but without your waking brain's sense of continuity, they don't feel out of place while you're in the dream. Your brain is stitching together bits and pieces of memory and imagination into a patchwork, and your dreaming self accepts the rough cuts without question. Another fascinating aspect is how your brain uses metaphor and symbolism during dreams. Since logic is dialed down, your mind communicates in more abstract, image-based ways. For example, if you're feeling anxious about a project at work, your dream might present that feeling as an endless staircase you can't climb, or a wave that keeps crashing over you. These dream symbols may not be literal, but they capture the emotion behind the experience. Your brain seems to prefer using surreal imagery rather than straightforward replay, because the imagery allows it to work through complex feelings in a more flexible way. Scientists have also studied how the brain's neurotransmitter environment during REM sleep contributes to this strangeness. Chemicals like dopamine, which influence reward and motivation, become more prominent. This might explain why dreams often feel driven by strong desires or fears, as though you're being pulled through a story you didn't write. At the same time, serotonin and norepinephrine, chemicals that stabilize mood and focus, drop to low levels. This imbalance produces an experience where emotions run wild and the rules of reality are optional. In other words, your brain's chemistry is tilted toward drama and unpredictability. What's especially interesting is how quickly your brain accepts contradictions in dreams. You might see someone transform into someone else right in front of you, and instead of reacting with shock, you just continue the conversation. This phenomenon is called dream delusion by some researchers. The inability to recognize impossibility within the dream state. It's similar to watching a play. You know on some level that the actors aren't really the characters they're portraying, but your brain goes along with it to stay immersed in the story. The difference is, in dreams, you don't even realize you're playing along. There's also evidence that the brain's ability to generate bizarre narratives in dreams may be connected to creativity in waking life. People who report having particularly unusual or surreal dreams also tend to score higher on measures of creative thinking. This makes sense because dreaming is essentially the ultimate brainstorming session, where ideas are thrown together without judgment or editing. Your brain is free associating, making connections between unrelated concepts, and sometimes those connections stick with you when you wake up. The crazier the dream, the more fertile the ground for original thinking. Dream bizarreness even extends to how your sense of self shifts during sleep. Sometimes you're the main character in your dream, but other times you're watching events unfold from a third-person perspective, or you find yourself inhabiting someone else's body entirely. This fluidity of identity reveals how malleable the brain self-image really is. The dream state gives your mind permission to play with the concept of you, detaching it from its usual anchor points. It's one of the reasons why dreams can feel so disorienting. Your brain temporarily redefines who you are. When you put all this together, it's clear that the strangeness of dreams isn't random. It emerges from a combination of reduced rational oversight, heightened emotional activity, altered brain chemistry, symbolic processing, and flexible self-identity. The end result is a nightly theatre where your brain experiments with ideas, images, and emotions in ways it never could during the day. It may feel chaotic, but that chaos has purpose. It allows your mind to operate in a freer, more imaginative state, one that may even feed into your waking creativity and resilience. Dreams don't just appear out of nowhere. Even the most bizarre, surreal, or seemingly random dream content is built from the raw material your brain already has stored. Think of your mind as a massive library where every book represents a memory. Some detailed, some vague, some buried in the dusty back corners where you rarely go. When you dream, your brain becomes a mischievous librarian, pulling books off the shelves at random, mixing them together and rewriting the endings. That's why dreams can feel both deeply personal and utterly nonsensical at the same time. To understand why your brain does this, you need to look at how memory works when you're awake. Your brain doesn't store experiences like a video recorder. Instead, every memory is broken down into components: visuals, sounds, emotions, smells, ideas, and stored across different networks. When you recall something later, your brain reassembles those pieces, which is why memories can feel fuzzy or distorted. Now imagine that process happening without the usual constraints of logic or sequence. That's dreaming, a memory reconstruction system running wild. Research has shown that dreams pull heavily from recent experiences. Psychologists call this the day residue effect, meaning the things you encounter during the day often show up in your dreams the following night. You might dream about a coworker after a stressful meeting, or about the TV show you watched before bed. But here's the twist: those elements rarely appear exactly as they were. Instead, they're woven into dream narratives in strange ways. That coworker might become a villain chasing you through a forest, or that TV show might blend into your family dinner. The dream brain doesn't simply replay, it repurposes. This repurposing is part of why dreams are thought to play a role in memory consolidation. When you sleep, especially during REM, your brain is believed to be strengthening important connections while discarding or reorganizing others. Dreaming may be the experiential side effect of this process. For example, when you're learning a new skill, say playing the piano or studying for an exam, people often report dreaming about the task. Sometimes the dreams are literal, like seeing yourself practicing. Other times they're abstract, like dreaming of patterns, puzzles, or symbols. In both cases, your brain is rehearsing and embedding the material, making it more likely you'll remember it the next day. Some of the strangest dream content, though, comes not from recent experiences, but from much older memories. Scientists have found that dreams often mix new material with fragments of long-forgotten moments. You might dream about a childhood toy alongside a co-worker you just met, or about a high school hallway combined with the grocery store you visited yesterday. This blending suggests that dreaming is not just about sorting new information, but also about integrating it with your existing mental library. By connecting old and new, your brain creates a more flexible, interconnected memory system. It's also worth noting that emotional memories are especially sticky in dreams. If something affects you deeply, whether it's joyful, stressful, or traumatic, it has a greater chance of showing up. That's why people dealing with loss, breakups, or major life changes often report intense dream activity. The amygdala, the brain's emotion center, is highly active during REM sleep, fueling these vivid and emotionally charged dream scenarios. Some researchers argue that this is your brain's way of processing and regulating emotional experiences. By revisiting them in a dream, you're essentially running simulations that help you adapt, cope, or heal. This process may be especially important in the case of trauma. For people with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, the brain sometimes struggles to process overwhelming memories, leading to recurring nightmares. These nightmares can feel like replays of the traumatic event, but in some cases they shift over time, incorporating new elements. This suggests that the brain is attempting, albeit imperfectly, to integrate the memory into the broader network of experiences. While painful, this may represent the mind's attempt to regain balance. Therapies like imagery rehearsal, where patients intentionally rewrite the endings of their nightmares while awake, are built on this very principle. The dream world can be reshaped, which in turn helps reshape how the memory feels in waking life. But dreams aren't only about replaying the past, they also create entirely new material by mixing and matching. For example, you might dream of a city that doesn't exist, but the details, the architecture, the sounds, the people are all drawn from bits and pieces of things you've seen before. That strange dream animal might be a mashup of your neighbor's dog and a documentary you once watched about lions. This blending process can feel bizarre, but it's also a powerful engine for creativity. Many artists, scientists, and inventors throughout history have credited dreams with providing sudden insights or inspirations. The sewing machine, the periodic table, even some famous works of music are rumored to have come from dream images or melodies. Your brain's strange recycling system is also a workshop for innovation. The neuroscientist Matthew Walker has described dreaming as overnight therapy, emphasizing how the brain uses this state to work through unresolved issues. But it could also be described as overnight problem solving. When you remove the strict filters of waking logic, your mind can make connections you'd never allow during the day. A problem that seems impossible before bed can suddenly have a new angle in the morning, thanks to the associative leaps your brain made during dreams. The randomness you experience in your dream world isn't meaningless. It's brainstorming at its most raw and unfiltered. Of course, this doesn't mean all dream content has deep significance. Sometimes your brain is just cleaning out the junk drawer. The fleeting, weird, and seemingly pointless dreams you don't even remember the next day might simply be the result of your brain discarding irrelevant details, like what color car was parked next to you, or what someone wore at lunch. In that sense, dreams serve a dual function, strengthening the meaningful while dumping the trivial. The process is messy, and the byproduct is the kaleidoscope of images you experience at night. One mystery is why certain memories resurface in dreams even if you haven't thought about them in years. Some researchers suggest this happens because memory storage isn't static, it's dynamic. Every time you recall a memory, it becomes malleable and can be rewritten. Dreams may serve as a hidden recall mechanism, pulling old material into the mix to keep it active and connected. This could explain why you suddenly dream about your third-grade teacher or a long-lost friend after decades. Your brain is flipping through the archive to keep certain connections alive. Another intriguing area of research is how dreams handle the concept of false memories. Just as your brain can blend fragments of real experiences into new dream stories, it can also create completely fictional scenarios that feel authentic. Upon waking, you might even mistake a dream detail for a real memory. Psychologists have long studied this overlap between dreaming and memory distortion because it highlights how unreliable memory can be. Dreams remind us that the boundary between fact and imagination isn't as clear as we'd like to believe. There's also the question of why we forget so many dreams so quickly. Some estimates suggest that within 5 minutes of waking, half of a dream's content is already gone, and within 10 minutes, 90% fades. This rapid forgetting may actually be beneficial. If we remembered every dream in perfect detail, our waking memory systems could become overwhelmed with irrelevant or contradictory material. Forgetting is the brain's way of keeping the dream world and waking world separate. Yet the emotional residue of dreams often lingers, which may be the brain's way of ensuring that the underlying lesson or feeling gets integrated, even if the plot details don't. What's fascinating is how memory interacts with self-awareness in dreams. In lucid dreams, for example, the dreamer realizes they're dreaming and sometimes gains control over the narrative. Studies show that lucid dreamers often have higher connectivity between memory-related regions and the prefrontal cortex, suggesting that access to memory is what allows them to recognize the dream state. In other words, remembering your waking life inside a dream is what lets you break free from the delusion that everything is real. This highlights just how central memory is to the dream experience. Without it, dreams would have no anchor to your sense of self. Taken together, it's clear that your brain's memory systems aren't just passively involved in dreaming. They're the raw material, the scaffolding, and the editor all at once. Dreams borrow from the recent and the distant, the emotional and the trivial, the real and the imagined. They reshape, remix, and sometimes even invent. The result can be strange, frightening, inspiring, or nonsensical, but it's never meaningless. Every dream is your brain's attempt to sort, file, connect, or clean up the endless library of your life. When you think about it this way, the chaos of dreams begins to make sense. They're not random nonsense at all. They're your brain's way of keeping the library alive, ensuring that old books don't get lost, new ones find their place, and the whole system remains flexible enough to adapt to whatever story comes next. If there's one theme that keeps showing up in the study of dreams, it's that your brain doesn't waste effort. As chaotic and nonsensical as your nightly movies might seem, the mind always has a reason for producing them. Sometimes it's problem solving, sometimes it's emotional processing, sometimes it's memory consolidation, and sometimes it's pure experimentation with what-if scenarios. By now, you've seen how dreams are shaped by brain chemistry, shifting activity in different regions, and the natural chaos of a system that thrives on patterns but occasionally breaks them apart. But there's still a deeper question here. What do these strange experiences say about what it means to be human? Dreams pull back the curtain on how your brain deals with contradictions. You live in a world where things are expected to make sense. Gravity pulls down, water is wet, people don't suddenly morph into animals in the middle of a conversation. But in the dream state, your brain shows you that it can operate just fine outside those rules. Why would evolution design a system like that? One possibility is that this mental flexibility is a survival advantage. By simulating the impossible, your brain keeps its creative muscles in shape, preparing you to handle unpredictable events in waking life. Think of it as training in the art of adaptability. If you can dream your way through absurd scenarios, maybe you're better equipped to navigate the curveballs reality throws at you. There's also the question of emotion. Dreams allow your brain to take feelings that might be too overwhelming or confusing during the day and run them through a kind of virtual reality. For example, if you've been bottling up anger at a friend, you might dream that the friend betrays you in some bizarre way, stealing your car, turning into a monster, or pushing you off a cliff. In the dream, your brain exaggerates the conflict to its emotional core, stripping away the surface details. When you wake up, the specific storyline may seem ridiculous, but the emotional message lingers. That's your brain's way of saying, there's something here you need to pay attention to. At the same time, dreams can be profoundly comforting. People often report dreaming about lost loved ones, sometimes in scenarios that feel like genuine reunions. Neuroscience might explain these dreams as memory retrieval mixed with emotional processing, but the psychological impact can be powerful. For many, these dreams provide closure, or at least a sense of connection that persists beyond waking life. Whether or not you interpret these dreams as spiritual, they highlight how the brain uses narrative to help you navigate grief. That's one of the paradoxes of dreaming. It can terrify you one night and heal you the next. Another layer worth exploring is how dreams reveal the brain's storytelling instinct. Even when your dreams are fragmented and strange, they often have some kind of plot, however shaky. You're running from something, you're trying to reach somewhere, you're facing an obstacle, you're searching for someone. These are basic story structures that humans have been using for thousands of years in myths, legends, and modern media. The fact that they also show up in dreams suggests that storytelling isn't just a cultural invention, it's a built-in feature of the brain. Your mind organizes experiences into stories automatically, even when you're asleep. Dreams, then, are practice in narrative construction, rehearsals in how to find meaning in chaos. And yet, for all the meaning-making we do around dreams, they also remind us of how little control we actually have over the workings of the mind. No matter how disciplined, rational, or logical you try to be during the day, at night, your brain proves that it's capable of creating realities that defy all your waking assumptions. This isn't a failure of control, it's a reminder that your consciousness rides on top of a much deeper ocean of subconscious processes. Dreams are waves rising from that ocean, carrying fragments of thought and memory to the surface, in forms you can glimpse but rarely master. Now let's pause and imagine what life would be like without dreams. If your brain never entered REM sleep, if you never had those surreal nightly adventures, what would change? Studies on people who are deprived of REM sleep show increased irritability, reduced ability to focus, and difficulty processing emotions. Without dreams, your mind becomes rigid, less adaptable, and more prone to emotional overload. It's almost as though the brain depends on its nightly dose of absurdity to function properly. Dreams keep the system flexible, balanced, and resilient. Of course, there's another side to this: nightmares. Unlike the playful strangeness of many dreams, Nightmares are often intense, frightening, and hard to shake off even after waking. Why would the brain create such distressing experiences? One theory is that nightmares serve as a rehearsal for threats. By simulating danger in a safe environment, your brain helps prepare you to handle real-world crises. Another possibility is that nightmares are the brain's way of forcing you to confront unresolved fears. Either way, they serve a purpose, unpleasant as it might feel at the time. They're reminders that not all learning is comfortable, and that growth often comes from facing what we'd rather avoid. Interestingly, nightmares and dreams often coexist in the same night. You might wake up from a terrifying chase scene, only to fall back asleep and find yourself in a peaceful garden. This rapid shift shows how fluid the dreaming mind really is, swinging between extremes of fear and comfort. The brain doesn't stick to one emotional register. It explores the full spectrum, as though testing the boundaries of human experience. It's a nightly theatre where you're not just the audience, but also the actor, the set designer, and the director, even if you don't consciously realize it. This brings us to one of the most thought-provoking questions. Do dreams reflect who you are, or do they create who you are? In one sense, they're mirrors, showing you the feelings, conflicts, and ideas swirling in your subconscious. But in another sense, they're sculptors, shaping your emotional responses, your problem-solving skills, and your creative potential. The relationship is two-way. You influence your dreams, and your dreams influence you. You could almost say that your waking life and your dream life are in constant conversation, each one feeding into the other. Dreams also highlight the mystery of consciousness itself. They prove that the mind doesn't need external input to generate vivid, immersive experiences. With your eyes closed and your body still, your brain produces entire worlds, complete with landscapes, characters, and stories. That raises a bigger philosophical question. If your brain can create convincing realities while you're asleep, how can you be sure that what you experience while awake isn't just another kind of dream? Philosophers from Descartes to modern thinkers have grappled with this idea. While science can tell us about the neural mechanisms behind dreams, the existential question they raise remains wide open. And maybe that's part of the beauty of dreaming. They remind us that the mind is both a scientist and an artist, both a problem solver and a poet. Dreams are experiments in possibility, rehearsals for reality, and performances of the subconscious all rolled into one. They're bizarre, frustrating, entertaining, and profound. They resist easy categorization because they're not meant to be pinned down. Dreams are proof that the human brain is endlessly inventive, even when we're not aware of it. When you think about it, the real crazy thing isn't that your brain creates such wild experiences every night. It's that we take them for granted. Every time you close your eyes, you're handed a ticket to a private, immersive show, unique to you and impossible to replicate. No one else will ever dream your exact dream, just as no one else will ever live your exact life. Dreams are intimate, fleeting, and mysterious, and yet they bind us together as humans because everyone has them. They're a shared feature of our species, even if their content is as individual as a fingerprint. As we reach the end of this deep exploration into why your brain creates such strange and fascinating dreams, let's pull together the many threads we've followed. Dreams are not just meaningless nighttime shows. They are complex productions crafted by your brain, blending memory, emotion, creativity, and biology into experiences that can feel more real than waking life. From ancient theories of divine messages to modern neuroscience labs scanning brain activity. Humanity has always been captivated by the question of why we dream and why those dreams are so bizarre. And now we know enough to say that the strangeness is not a flaw in the system, but one of its greatest strengths. Think about everything we've covered. Your dreams often pull from your memory banks, recycling fragments of your day, reshaping them into surreal stories. They're influenced by the architecture of your brain during REM sleep, when logic quiets down and creativity steps into the spotlight. Your emotional centers fire at full strength, generating intensity, while your reasoning centers take a step back, allowing the absurd to feel ordinary. Add in brain chemistry that favors drama over calm, and you get nights filled with strange encounters, impossible transformations, and journeys through landscapes that bend the rules of physics. And yet, for all their chaos, dreams serve many purposes. They help you process difficult emotions, replay challenging experiences in new ways, and sometimes even prepare you for future events. They give your brain a rehearsal space to face danger without risk, to solve problems creatively, and to rewire emotional responses. The very weirdness of dreams may be essential because it allows your brain to explore possibilities without being confined by the strict rules of logic and reality. This is where dreams intersect with the mystery of human creativity. Great thinkers, scientists, and artists throughout history have found inspiration in their dreams. Kekule's vision of a snake biting its tail revealed the ring structure of benzene. Paul McCartney heard the melody of Yesterday in a dream. Salvador Dali deliberately used his dreamlike imagery to spark new artistic directions. These examples show that the bizarre logic of dreams can unlock doors we don't open in the daylight. If our dreams were mundane, repeating reality as is, we might lose that gift of imaginative expansion. But dreams aren't always comfortable. Nightmares remind us of the brain's role in processing fear and trauma. While unsettling, nightmares can serve as a pressure valve, letting us confront fears in symbolic form. They can highlight anxieties we might be ignoring while awake, acting almost like an emotional messenger. This balance between pleasant dreams and nightmares is part of the brain's ongoing effort to regulate and recalibrate your mental state. Even the scariest or strangest dream may have a role in keeping you emotionally balanced. Of course, not all dreams are profound. Sometimes your brain is simply clearing out noise, running background maintenance, or stitching random memories together without deeper meaning. It's like your mental hard drive is defragmenting, and you happen to glimpse the process. That's why you might dream about waiting in line at a grocery store, or about a random conversation that feels incredibly detailed but leads nowhere. These kinds of dreams might not carry heavy symbolism, but they still reflect the brain's effort to organize itself during rest. And then there's the mystery that remains. Even with all of today's technology, fMRI scans, sleep labs, decades of research, scientists still don't have a definitive answer for why dreams exist in the first place. There are strong theories: memory consolidation, emotional processing, creativity, threat simulation, but no single explanation fully captures the richness and variety of dreaming. That uncertainty is part of what makes the subject endlessly fascinating. The brain remains one of the last great frontiers, and dreams are a nightly reminder of how much we still have to learn. One of the most beautiful aspects of dreaming is how personal it is. No two people will ever have the exact same dream, because each dream is stitched together from the fabric of your unique memories, fears, hopes, and experiences. Even if two people dream about the same place, the details, emotions, and meanings will differ. In that sense, dreams are like fingerprints of the mind, private, unrepeatable, and deeply tied to your inner world. And if you step back to think about it, isn't it remarkable that every night, as you lie down to sleep, your brain gifts you with entire worlds? Some are terrifying, some are hilarious, some are nonsensical, and some feel so real that you wake up questioning reality. All of them, though, show the incredible power of your mind. Your brain is not only capable of navigating the waking world, but also of generating entire alternate realities in the dark, realities that vanish the moment you wake up, but leave echoes behind. There's also something profoundly human about dreaming. It connects us across time and culture. Ancient Egyptians believed dreams were messages from the gods. Indigenous peoples of the Americas viewed them as journeys into the spirit world. Psychoanalysts saw them as windows into the unconscious. And today, neuroscientists study them as data streams of brain activity. Every interpretation reflects the same awe. The recognition that dreaming is one of the most mysterious and powerful aspects of being alive. It also brings us full circle to the role of sleep itself. Sleep isn't just about resting your body. It's an active state where your brain performs its most complex and vital maintenance. Without enough sleep, and without enough REM sleep in particular, your ability to regulate emotions, remember things, and think creatively starts to suffer. Dreams are part of that system, woven into the very fabric of why sleep is essential. In a way, dreams are proof that rest is not passive. While you sleep, your mind is working harder than you realize, taking you on strange adventures while also restoring balance to your waking self. So the next time you wake up from a dream that makes no sense at all, maybe you were chased by a giant marshmallow, or talking to a version of your grandmother who was also a rock star, remember that the strangeness is the point. Your brain is doing its job, exploring, experimenting, and keeping you healthy in ways science is still uncovering. And if the dream lingers, puzzling or inspiring you, maybe that's part of the gift too. Dreams remind us that the human mind is not confined by reality alone. It has the power to create universes every night, universes that vanish with the morning light but shape who we are in ways both subtle and profound. Thank you for joining me tonight on Sleep Space, where we've unraveled the mystery of why your brain creates such crazy dreams. As you drift off later, you'll step into another one of those inner worlds, maybe carrying with you a little more curiosity about what's happening behind the scenes. Sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, even the strangest dream is part of the extraordinary story your mind tells you every night.